Hello and welcome. I wanted to take a moment to go over a couple of things in your textbook for this week. And what I would like you to do, and how we'll usually do this, is if you go through your textbook and sort of follow along as I talk about these items, you'll be able to get a really good indication as to what I'm talking about. Now, what we're going to be doing right now is in this particular section, we're going to be looking at the following items. And again, if you'll get your textbook out, you can follow along and see what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Windows 7, Unit A and B. We're going to talk about the Concepts 2010 section, Unit A. And then we're going to talk about the Internet 2010, Unit A. And this is just a brief kind of introduction to those particular items in the chapter. So let's take a look at Windows 7 Unit A to get us started. Now it begins on page, it looks like Windows 2, and this is just essentially getting started with Windows 7. And Windows 7 is probably going to be what most of you all will be using. If you're curious about what you're using, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, lower left-hand corner of your screen, you'll be able to see what kind of start button you have. And yours may look a little different depending on what version of Windows you have. But Windows 7 is probably the most common and has been now for the last couple of years. Page 4 and 5 talk about looking at the desktop. 6 and 7 is a refresher for those of you that want a little bit more information about pointing and clicking. 8 and 9 is talking about starting a Windows 7 program. If you're already watching this, you're already using Blackboard, you're already using a program, so you're okay. Section and page 10 and 11 talks about working with windows. These are all the little windows that are scattered across where sometimes you have to maximize, minimize, and restore those. That's also talked about on page 13 or 12 and 13 as well. And then command and dialog boxes are talked about on page 14 and 15. And then finally, the last section, you talk a little bit about where to get help and exiting Windows. And so that really sums up the first section in Windows 7. Now, looking at your textbook, Unit B of Windows 7 is understanding file management. And essentially what this is going to talk about is understanding the difference between files and folders, looking at creating and saving a file, changing and exploring the different views, opening, editing, and saving files, copying files, renaming files, searching for files, folders, and programs, and deleting and restoring files. This is extremely important because you've been asked to download the data files for this course. And so you'll want to definitely pay attention to Unit B so you can get a better handle on exactly what is expected when it comes to downloading and separating the actual files for this course. So look at Windows 26 and 27. That's just a concept of folders and files and how those are arranged. So take a moment to look at those and you get a little bit of experience about those as well. Creating and saving a file is talked about, as well as exploring the files and folders on a computer, changing file and folder views, and then copying files. This is probably important because, again, you're asked to download data files related to this course. Moving and renaming files, that's probably going to be pretty important as well. You want to make sure you have a pretty good understanding about how to do that. And then searching for files and programs. How many of you have lost your files? You can't find it. This gives you a little heads up as to how to look for those kinds of items. And then finally, Unit B of Windows 7 talks about deleting and restoring files. Now, just because you move them down to the recycle bin doesn't mean that they're deleted. They're actually just held in this recycle bin until you empty the recycle bin. And then you can actually restore the files, which essentially means undeleting those individual items. Okay, so that covers Windows 7, both units A and B. Moving on, looking at your textbook, let's talk a little bit about understanding essential computer concepts. And this is Unit A. It begins in the concepts section on page 2. And this is just talking a little bit about the different types of computers. You may be watching me right now on a laptop, a smartphone, a tablet. You may be using a desktop, a netbook. There are all sorts of different types of computers. And this just talks a little bit about the different types. I'm recording this on a laptop, my little MacBook Pro, but I also have an iPad and an iPhone and could watch these videos on those as well. The Page 4, Concepts, talks about the different system components. And what I would like you to pay attention to with regards to this section is looking at the different types of pieces that go into a computer. The motherboard, the input, output, processing, those sorts of things. You'll need to be able to understand the difference between input and output and processing. Now, looking on page 6 and page 7, this is probably where you're going to need a little assistance and really read this, because the way computers are operated, you don't communicate with computers with letters and numbers. Well, at least not directly. Directly, you are creating and communicating with the computers with words and letters. But actually, the computer only speaks binary language, which is a series of ones or zeros. And those ones and zeros make up the language that the computer speaks. And that's talked about on Concepts page 6 and Concepts page 7. So you'll want to read that a little bit and get a better understanding of that, because I bet you're going to see the term binary on your exam in the next few weeks. Another thing that you'll definitely need to be familiar with is the section about the different types of memory, and this is on page Concepts 8 and Concepts 9. You'll definitely want to read about this because you'll want to understand the differences between RAM and ROM, and so you'll definitely want to read through those sections. Storage media on the next page, really just all about flash drives. We hardly use any other types of storage media. Input devices on the following page is like the mouse. For instance, here's my mouse. That's all input devices. And then data communications, you have like a wireless network drops and wireless connectors that allow you to communicate with a network. That's also talked about on page 18 and 19 as well. Now, something I didn't mention earlier is, of course, as you're listening to this video, if at any point you want to take some notes, the beauty of this format is you can pause me. So just click down there on the bottom of your screen somewhere, just click, 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 and then you'll be able to pause me and take some notes while I'm talking about these items. Can't really do that in class, so that helps you out, and it works out really well. And then the last couple of things I want to talk about on page 22 is understanding system software. This is the software that actually runs the computer, like Windows 7 or the Mac OS X operating system. Make sure you understand what system software is. And then on page 24, make sure you understand what application software is. System software will go through and actually run the computer. Application software actually sits on top of the system software and performs certain specific tasks like word processing or spreadsheet applications and so on. Okay, well, that is the computer concepts section. The last little bit I want to talk about is getting started with Internet Explorer 8. Again, on your textbook, if you're following along, it's going to look something like this: getting started with Internet Explorer 8. Now, you probably maybe recently upgraded to Internet Explorer 9. That is an option, and most of this will still apply, but it's okay if you have Internet Explorer 9 and you're saying, well, how do I check? Well, usually somewhere in the upper area of your screen, like in your menu, one of the options is Help, and you can click on that Help and then use the drop-down box, and one of the options would be About Internet Explorer, and that's going to tell you what version you use. Most of this is pretty self-explanatory. Make sure you know what www stands for, and make sure you know what HTTP stands for. www stands for World Wide Web. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And then there's some icons, a list of different buttons at the bottom of page 6, I believe. You can see the different buttons for Internet Explorer 8. Might help you to better use the Internet Explorer program. And then on page 12, you want to look a little bit about the safely browsing and security, because you certainly don't want to stumble across some bad programs that will end up messing up your computer. And then that really is it for that section. So in this video we covered the Windows 7 Unit A and Unit B, which talks about not only the basics of the operating system, Windows 7, but also file management. And as I said, it's going to be very important that you understand how to manage your files. You're going to be asked to save, and you're going to be asked to rename, and all sorts of things that you will want to be able to do. So that's in the Windows 7 file management section, which was Unit B. And then you'll also want to be able to understand some basic computer concepts, the different types of computers like laptop, netbook, tablet, and so on. RAM and ROM, the different components of a computer like processing, storage, memory, input and output. And remember, input is something like the mouse. Output would be something like the monitor. And then finally, with Internet Explorer section, make sure that you're pretty comfortable with browsing the web pages, and then stay safe, of course, when you browse. Well, this video ran a little longer than what they normally do. The other ones are usually a little bit shorter because they're only covering one section. So I appreciate you watching, and as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to post to the discussion board or email me at my email address within the Blackboard system. Thank you, and have a great day.